Hello, welcome to Your Geek Show. I'm Miss Shannon here with my friend Jayden Satia, and our other friend Rob Callahan is unavailable today. So we unwisely, I'm beginning to believe, let our other friend Nika Hotep, our bound incubus demon, come in this week to help us out. So
yay!
I know, I counted it as a field trip. Yeah.
Yay.
Just to remind everybody of Nika Hotep and his background, he is our bound incubus demon. I met him a number of years ago when he was still cruising around all the bar scenes here in the Twin Cities, and he was causing so much chaos that I decided that I would do the justice to the bar scene here in Twin Cities, and I actually bound him, and now he has been causing much less trouble.
Thanks.
And so, but you are good on the show. You're good on the show. I'll give you that.
I appreciate that.
Yes, you've been behaving, so that's
But doesn't
fine.
he
I
have
appreciate
demands now, like a TV?
Yes, I would love a TV because, frankly, where she keeps me, it's quite dull.
Okay, to bring everybody else up to speed, what normally happens is that I had him living in a jewelry box that I keep on my dresser at home, and he's been shaking it and complaining. So I actually was thinking that I was very kind by getting him a larger jewelry box. It has a mirror in it. It's all kinds of things. It has compartments now.
I'm very good looking.
So
Yes.
it's not like you don't have enough things to do.
Exactly. He's just whining, and this is why I don't give in to his demands. It's like having a child that complains too often, and then once you give in, then they just run all over you. So I got him a smartphone. He's not sitting in there with nothing to do. He has a workout room, which he doesn't use. He has a smartphone. He has all kinds of stuff. And so the smartphone was the problem because now he's on Twitter. And so yes.
Yeah, the Twitter's awesome.
Yeah.
What exciting stuff is happening in your box that you have to tweet about?
Well, I'm following all these people. It's pretty fun.
It's actually been doing him, justice. He has a very, very keen social network.
And I'm on the face page, too.
Yes, Facebook. He is on Facebook.
Oh, it's the face...
Facebook.
Face page.
Yes,
Face
Facebook.
your page.
Oh.
It's okay. It's all fine. So he's catching up on all of these things. And so it's been very, very cathartic for him. But you just have to keep an eye on him because sometimes he just goes awry and I have to just bring
is there
him
like
in.
a peephole in the box that you kind of like look through and make sure that he's doing the right things?
Normally what I do is
Or do
I
you
will
like-
crack the lid a bit because it's like when you put your
For a little
puppy in the
ventilation?
kennel. Exactly. When you put your puppy in the kennel, you don't want to leave them out for too long when you leave because sometimes your puppy just will ruin your house. And that's what Nika Hotep is like. And so he just makes these silly demands, and then people think I'm being mean to him because he's an incubus demon. So that's what he does, is that he makes you feel
I
good.
promised to behave if we had cable.
He's so lying. He's lying, though. So
Then
don't
you
feel
have
bad
another
for him.
demand after that. Then you have another demand. So
Never
This
ending with
this
this
is not
demon.
give a mouse a cookie.
Never ending. And honestly, I have enough troubles because it wasn't like I was really good at spells. I really just watched a lot of Charm. So occasionally he gets out, and then it's always chaotic, and I
it's
feel
because
bad
you're
about
not
it.
good at reading the fine print.
I'll listen to you. But I do appreciate you coming in and joining us.
Thank you so
and
much for coming.
this weekend, Rob Callahan, our resident music geek, is actually at a local Doctor Who convention called Console Room. And one of the things that he did let us know is that he will be interviewing Colin Baker from
Nice.
Doctor Who fame this weekend. And he said that he should be able to bring us some information and
clips
some
and
clips
stuff?
from next week when he's here.
Very cool.
So that'll be really fun. So I know he's having a great time. We've been texting each other. So he's off being, Doctor Who famous at Console Room. So that's fantastic.
Is he also being Rob Callahan?
He's being Rob Callahan. Very much so. So I've already been following him on Twitter too, and he's very much in the Rob Callahan persona that he does. But this week we are going to have our guest geek of the week. She will be here in a few minutes as well. But we have our geek stories of the week, and so this week, first of all, I want to say belated Happy Towel Day to all of our friends out there who are big fans of Life, the Universe, and Everything, and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So that was on Monday. Also, it was Star Wars Day. So those people who are celebrating, we give that to you. I don't celebrate the Star Wars Day as much as I do Happy Towel Day because it's so close to May the 4th be with you. So I kind of feel like if as far as my geekly holidays, there's a lot of Star Wars already in my life, kind of thing. And
I don't know. Is that something that's possible? Too much Star Wars in your life?
I'm not saturated on the Star Wars, but it is close. So, Nick Hotep, can you do me a favor? I heard the doorbell. Can you please go let our guest in?
I shall go.
Thank you very much. That is, she's being
Live
very
podcast.
polite. Yes, so go answer the door, Nick Hotep.
I'm glad the towel day was that, and not like a disparaging remarks about a
No,
different race and-
it never occurred to me that it could be
I
that
know,
you are
right?
correct. No, it means that you should always know where your towel is, and it's a Douglas Adams reference. So
Right.
you're correct.
I just want to make sure anybody who's new and like towel day, what are they talking about? I
and
just
they're
wanna
like,
make
those
sure.
geeks are so mean and racist. No, it has
Racist,
nothing to do
prejudice.
with that at all. Oh, but well played. Well played. So, our geek stories of the week. I decided that we would start, before we get into the story specifically guest related. I wanted to pick some things that I thought that she would also be able to be a part of, and so since she is sitting down and getting comfortable, I will introduce her as well. Our guest geek of the week is Brandy Brown. So very.
Welcome.
Satirist, comedian, very funny lady, and also very fond of a couple of geek specialities, as our guest geek of the weeks always are. So we will get to one of the things that I know that is near and dear to her heart, Murder, She Wrote, later on in this program. But Brandy, what I brought a couple stories that were movie related, and I picked these in particular because I figured that you would have an opinion on these because I thought we'd focus on the Transformers movie series, because one of the things that I think come up in conversation in our little geekly circles is all of these reboots and whether they actually count as taking our beloved characters from the 80s and 90s and ruining them, or are they bringing them to an audience that is now new, and should we continue around this route? Because it does seem like a lot of the outcry is you are taking my childhood and ruining and stomping on my heart.
Boo, Gem.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about Gem and the Holograms last week, Brandy, when we were here. And so one of the things that we saw is that that I saw in the news of Geek this week is that Transformers, the series, and I am not a big fan of the Transformer movie series. Michael Bay, and I am a fan of explosions, so I would think that I would like them, but I am not a fan of the Transformers movie series. So have you seen most of these movies?
No.
Okay.
I watched the show as a kid, and that was good enough for me.
Okay, so you're familiar with the canon of the Transformers, and so I think that that's part of it, is that now that we're to the new ones, it doesn't have enough of what I had as an expectation for somebody that was a fan of the TV show as a kid, and they kind of took these characters and they're not doing things that I want to see them do in big movies, so I get really disappointed. So what they're looking at is that, first of all, they have hinted now that one of the new standalone movies that they're going to do in the franchise is a Bumblebee movie, one of the most beloved characters in the Transformers world. You're shaking your head, Nick Hotep.
Yeah.
Why do you just think that they won't be able to execute it appropriately?
He's a Beetle.
Well, yes.
I mean,
he's actually a Camaro now,
yeah,
isn't he?
seriously, he was a Beetle that got turned into a Camaro. I mean,
Correct.
Seriously, how could you?
But he's so lovable.
Correct. He is probably the most lovable.
So
of
there's
all
that
of the
question of,
Transformers
are they
characters.
trying to bring Bumblebee back for a separate standalone series? I mean, whatever they're going to turn that into, just like they did with Wolverine, with
Correct.
X-Men, right? So, and that had a huge following because that character was so well
Because
loved.
now they're saying there will be a Transformers cinematic universe, is what we're having.
so-
I mean,
other
if they
things.
haven't gotten it to be beloved at this point, it's not going to be. Like, I think the thing about, like, Wolverine versus any, like the Transformer franchise, like, those were decent movies. Those were,
Right.
like, good to watch, and that was fun to watch. But, like, no, they aren't going to suddenly be like, oh, finally we pulled it together.
Right.
But
Yeah.
is the origin story going to be okay? Let's go watch them put the tires on. Here's how we put the engine in.
Well,
and-
that leads us to our second Transformers related story, is that now they are talking about possibly doing a prequel that would be like more of a Transformers origin story as one of the other options that they would do in what they are now calling the Transformers cinematic
Here's
universe.
the
I just think it's
here's
funny
the
that
Ford plant. Here's the GM plant.
There's a strike that's built for years. Someone just tinkers in their backyard.
There's some recalls happening.
My Toyota airbag isn't working.
At least what I think gives part of this hope is that what they're calling what might be out there as Transformers 1, there is an option that it might be an actual animated film instead of a Michael Bay, explosion-ridden monstrosity again. Because like I said, there's so much going on in those movies, I just can't even keep track
First and
of.
foremost, they're about at least 20, 25 minutes too long.
Correct.
All of them. All of those films. And as far as, again, if you like Michael Bay, you're going to love Explosion. And like vice versa. So you go watch a Michael Bay film because you want to be engulfed in just action after action after action. So having them perhaps kind of take a step back and do a prequel, and again, prequel hopefully is more story than it is actual action piece of it. So like the origin story, I could be interested in learning about, depending on how the script kind of comes out.
Here's part of the reason why I think that I might like it is that I think one of the things I had with the initial Transformers movies, we'll say 1 through 3, and probably 3.5, is that what they do with the human characters, you really don't care. You're just so like, what did you do? When Shia was in them, I'm like, I didn't like him anyway, and now I extra don't like him because they didn't give him anything good to do. So he was just, you're just waiting for Optimus Prime to talk. Like, I remember sitting in the theater going, if Optimus Prime doesn't talk soon, I'm leaving. And then he started talking like, all right, cool, sit down, get your popcorn out again. It's all good.
I just kind of like the approach taken by Mad Max. I mean, the recent ones. Just like, it's the equivalent of having a friend just be like, hey, you want to see something blow up? And you're like, yeah, I do. Yeah. Right. And then that happens. You're like, thank you. I need to see some shit blow up.
Right.
Like, literally no expectation. I was like, I just want to watch stuff burn for an hour or two.
And I think that that's part of that we are so accustomed to having poorly constructed geek films that whenever they have at least a loosely based decent story, you're like, yay for us. When it's something that you can take one of your friends that's not into these kind of movies and go, no, really, it's a good movie, you'll be okay. We're just so shell shocked after so many years of terrible films that just look cool that, you know, now I want both, because I know you can make both, because you do have something like a Captain America. You don't? Okay.
I mean, I'm not like, I don't like sci-fi and fantasy that much. Like, I'll watch it, but like sometimes I just don't want to think, and like I'd rather you just not try to do it all in one film. It's like sometimes films are supposed to be popcorn movies and they're just supposed to be stupid fun. Sometimes you want to watch a stupid comedy. You don't need like a whole dramatic element. Adam Sandler funny people. Like
right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, San Andreas. I mean, seriously, we know that San Andreas, it's gonna, you know, California's gonna sink into the ocean. I mean, how
it's gonna happen next year.
It's like Step Up movies. I love Step Up movies. I'm just here for the dancing, and the rest of the plot is ridiculous, and I laugh hysterically. But I'm like, that's some cool dancing. Step Up 3 is a garbage movie.
Right. I mean, but how good?
But is that the expectation that the studios and the screenplay scripts have set for you already, so that you're? So we'll go back to that conversation you were having earlier about our expectations of our 80s, 90s beloved characters, films,
correct,
and how now they're so, I guess, quote unquote, dumbified for our audiences now. Are they trying to reach a new audience, or are they trying to, try to evolve with the culture of, I can watch this on an iPhone and not have to pay attention to it?
And go ahead, Brandy.
Well, I think the thing is, you look at, for example, and this is kind of a weird leap, but Sesame Street, the first season of that is on DVD, and there's a warning on it that says not for children. And it's a situation where the norms have changed. Like, I think the reason why it's not for children is because, like, kids just go to strangers' houses. And, like, they're like, no, we don't do that anymore. Or it's like how they had to change Snuffy into being real in 1984 because of, like, they didn't want kids, like, hiding molestation or anything.
And I do agree that there needs to be updates sometimes. I think where I get frustrated with the situation is when, instead of making it an update, you use a character and it doesn't translate. Like, sometimes it doesn't translate to what we do now. And if it doesn't, don't call it that old character. Just start all over.
Well,
if you have a whole new audience, then that's fine. That's not a problem.
The only reason that they would, like, again, with Sesame Street, what their writers actually do, and actually a weird thing about Sesame Street is that their writers are actually, it's like a pipeline to SNL because it just is sketch comedy writing.
Fair enough.
And they target the parents. And they're like, kids will watch anything. We just put these celebrities on so their parents will, like, watch it with them.
Okay.
And so I think that their whole reasoning for being like, oh, we'll bring back Jim is because these parents will see it and be like, oh, I love Jim, I'll show my kids. And then they mess it up. It's like, kids will watch anything. Just call it Hannah Montana or call it whatever. Like, kids would be pissed if it was Hannah Montana and then it wasn't Miley Cyrus.
And
so
that's why I got,
like,
as a parent, mad
chicks.
when it was, when I was expecting the Gem, it seemed like they were catering to me as their audience. And then when I actually saw the trailer, I'm like, this has nothing to do with me. I am not watching it now. And now I'm on Twitter complaining. So I think that I feel similarly about some of these Transformers teeters is that it's close enough that I'm like, okay, fair enough. At least I want to see robots fighting, and trust me, I will watch a pulpy movie. I am a big fan of Pacific Rim. That is the dumbest, most awesome movie ever.
Right,
that's it,
but
and
that
I was
was
fine
good.
with it.
But
yes.
that was good because it followed the formula of the old Japanese what's his name. Big guy, Mothra.
Right, Mothra, Godzilla, all of those things.
And
I'm fine with
followed that formula.
Monsters and robots fight, battle,
Exa-
go. Don't over-explain it. So I agree with Brandy, what she said
Right.
before. Sometimes don't put too much into it.
I think the other thing is they just want to go with merchandising.
Yeah.
So they're just like, well, we can easily make a lot of toy robots. Let's keep going. But like Jam don't understand. There's no really merchandising since they strayed so far away from the original.
Right, they
that
look
there's
like
no
Kiss
merchandising.
with no good music. Is what they.
So while I was trapped in the box, because that's where she keeps me, I did find this really cool reboot on Power Rangers.
But that's the adult version. I remember you telling me about that.
Did you see that? It was super
Yes.
cool. It had James Vanderbeek and Katie Sackhoff, and it was Power Rangers Part Dud. It was the unauthorized version of it.
I think I heard an interview with James Vanderbeek talking about why he did that, and he was just like, it seemed fun.
Exactly.
It seemed like a
And
good
it
time.
was cool.
Right.
I mean, it was super, super, super cool, and it was totally badass.
And Brandy, just to reiterate, Nick Hotep, I know I told you before you got here because I don't like to shock him. He normally hangs out in a box on my dresser, but he's watches a lot of YouTube videos. He's fine.
Because she doesn't buy me a television.
I'm not getting you a TV. You sit around enough as it is.
We have
It's
budget.
fine.
We totally have
You
budget.
know how you normally have to treat your cat, Brandy? That's how I have to treat him. He is just my cat.
My
that
cat is
does not
scared
act-
of everything and runs away.
There's a spray bottle right over there.
You don't need to. She's scared of plastic bags. She's scared of Nalgene bottles opening. She's very scared of everything. She's adorable.
Aw. See, Brandy, I love Brandy because Brandy has a wealth of knowledge in things that I don't want to say that you wouldn't normally expect, because what does that even mean? But like, Brandy is my friend that when I go, hey, Murder, She Wrote was on for 12 seasons and I didn't really watch it. Can you tell me why? And Brandy will know exactly why and have a very logical argument as to why it was outstanding. And so, I mean, and she also shares my love of cat videos, and most people clown me for that. So Brandy
Cat
is
videos are awesome.
Yeah, and I'm actually Brandy, you want to come with me to the cat video thing at the Walker?
When is it?
It's in a few weeks.
It's at the CHS field.
There we go. Yeah. So I'll give you all the information. You'll
St.
love
Paul
it.
Saint Stadium field.
I want to go.
Okay, I'll bring you with.
I kept tweeting them last year because I was at a thing. I kept tweeting them pictures of Heathcliff using the cat video hashtag. I don't know if they got mad about it, but I was like, whatever. And I got
Did it
people
get
at
any
like a
traction?
thing I was emceeing to just tweet pictures of Heathcliff.
So Brandy, are you still a big fan of the Murder She
Yeah,
Wrote
I mean, it comes
episodes?
on every night. Like, I don't. It comes on the Hallmark movies every night, and it's just kind of like a routine. Like, I settle in.
Are you to the point like I'm a fan of Doctor Who, so I think that I've seen all of the episodes. I couldn't tell you about every single episode, but is that one of those things that you could go, all right, we're going to give you an introduction to Murder, She Wrote, and you could bring people up to speed on it? It's just something
It's
that
like
you
Law and
enjoy
Order.
casually.
It's like you can watch them out of order, and it's just kind of, it's like a procedural crime thing, and I just like to watch it because it's just so many random people show up on it, like, what's his name? Bryan Cranston was on it one episode, and it's like, you see, there's an episode with like LeVar Burton, John Amos, Adam West, Jerry Orbach, and like someone else was in this episode, and it's just like all these celebrities, and you're just like, what?
And it's one of those shows that I actually want to like better because I am a fan of Angela Lansbury. And so when I was looking into this, I actually found an interview that Angela Lansbury did in 1986 where she even mentions that she was pretty skeptical that it was even going to work.
I had no idea that it would be possible that a small series about a lady detective story writer could suddenly become the most important thing after 60 Minutes on Sunday nights. And here we are, we're at the top of the heap. And that's it's a very luxurious feeling, let me tell you. And I'm very, very grateful and enormously thankful that it worked out that way. The television audience is an audience that is totally separate from a movie audience or a Broadway audience. I mean, there are a list of actors and actresses that are persona grata on television. And if you're not on that list, it doesn't matter how famous and how much you've arrived in those other mediums, they're not interested in having you on television for their television audience, they being the networks. The networks are, you can have great success anywhere else, but if you haven't cut it with the TV audience, you're nowhere. Now, that's a challenge, isn't it? I mean, in itself, to get on that list of people that would be presentable on the box. And I said to myself, damn it, I'm going to appeal to that mass audience one of these days. And that's why I wanted to beard the lion in his lair, as it were. I'm not going to go through a whole career without having hit home with that group, you see.
When I found that interview, I was just like, now how dope is Angela Lansbury? That she's like, I'm going to conquer this, and I know I have my Tony Awards, and I've made all these movies, but I'm going to conquer television.
Well, I think Murder, She Wrote's also great, because I just like to research stuff, and then I also just like to kind of like jokingly, like, here's how I watch Murder, She Wrote. First of all, if you don't know the basis of this, she is a mystery writer who travels all over, and then like wherever she happens to go, people happen to accidentally get murdered or get purposely murdered.
Right.
I mean,
that happens to me all the time.
And then she solves it. And if you just think about it, you're like, everywhere she goes, like also in her town of 3,500 people, Cabot Cove, Maine, people get murdered. Like,
how many people live in Cabot Cove? And
Why do people keep moving there?
She did that. She did that. So this is what I pretend every episode of Murder, She Wrote. This is how I like got people on Facebook involved. I was like, hey guys, I think I have a theory. I think every episode of Murder, She Wrote, the show was just like a regular procedural, and it was entertaining enough, just kind of turn off your brain at the end of the day. But it's a way better show if you pretend every episode is about Jessica Fletcher and or her ghostwriter, because she's never really writing, framing someone for the murder she clearly committed. Because like everywhere she goes, there's a murder. But everywhere, like, wouldn't you kind of just start putting patterns together? Every time she's in town, someone gets murdered, and like the FBI would have even gotten involved at that point. So it's just like every episode is about her like framing.
And her character supposedly was like a very prolific writer, had like 250 books
she
or
had,
something
like,
crazy.
Movies. She had movie deals. There was one episode she went and like she was insisting that the director not change her book, and then the director ended up dead. And you're like, come on. And then like somebody was like, we know you did that, Jessica. And she was like, no, I didn't. I was like, oh, that one person was so close to finding out the truth. And then
and the show was actually really interesting if you look at the lifespan of it, because it was one of those shows that it was doing really well, surprising the people at the network, and then it took a little dip in the ratings, and then Angela Lansbury took over the production and the direction of a lot of the episodes, and then it had a jump, and that's part of the reason why it got 12 seasons out of it.
And there's an episode towards the end of its run that is actually like they're throwing some shade at Friends.
Yes, it was called Buds.
Yeah,
yes.
It was called Buds, and it was on a sitcom with all these like young actors, and it was just about, because I guess they switched them to Thursday. Murder, She Wrote to Thursday, and the Friends was on its meteoric ride, and they were just like, oh well, fine, if you want these kids doing this stupid stuff, take that.
And it was
kill them all.
And I also think that it's interesting the way that she went about, making the show, and it was one of those things where they're like, well, she's not a sex symbol. There's not somebody that you'll want to put on a calendar. You're not going to be back to Brandy's thing before about merchandise. But then all of these things were successful. There was a board game that was created regarding Murder, She Wrote. There was two computer games that were based, kind of like Clue.
She is OBE though. That's pretty sexy.
Well,
what?
Order of the British Empire.
Okay.
They also wanted to reboot it with Octavia Spencer, and that got shut down because like everybody's like, no. Even I'm like, no, come on, just like make a new mystery show. That's fine. But like,
isn't Castle like that now? The show, have you guys ever seen?
I watch Castle.
Yeah, is it like that? Is it kind of
he's a
similar?
mystery writer, kind of.
He's a writer.
I have a friend I used to work with named Tor who insisted that he wanted an episode of Castle with Angela Lansbury as Jessica Fletcher. But like the other reason why I think like Octavia Spencer would be terrible is because Jessica Fletcher literally just rolls up to cops and says like, hey, pardon me, but I have a suggestion, and just like walks onto crime scenes. Like, do you think a black woman would be able to do that? No, that's crazy talk. And it's just funny how like nosy Jessica Fletcher is, because she'll just like walk up and there'll be a murder, and she just walks up and is like, "Excuse me, officer." She's like, "Excuse me, but perhaps I could help you." And they're just like, "Please go away." And she's like, "I just want to look at that body." And they're just like, "Okay, whatever."
Just having your helpful aunt just show up to like help you with your crime scene.
Again, she's British.
Yeah.
Well, no, in this show she's Maine. She's from Maine. So
yes.
like she has a pretty decent Mainer accent because it's such a weird accent, but sometimes she plays like her cousin. It was from like.
So who now? Which actress out there, if there was a reboot, who do you think would be able to come close to?
I don't think anyone, because Jessica, even like Angela Lansbury was talking about the reboot, and she's like, no, like I was the first, I was the OG, and like I like an actress who's just like, no, you're not, I was the best.
Does that go back to our previous conversation? If there's just some things that you have to go, I'm sorry, you need to just remake a whole different show. You can't redo it.
The charm of Murder, She Wrote is very much set in when it was made, and like this, like the caliber of the stars. Now it's a Law and Order episode. You get your cameos, and you know, and weirdly, except in the Law and Order formula, and actually someone told me like this: if you watch an old episode of Law and Order and you see a character who wasn't famous at the time, or an actor or an actress who wasn't famous at the time, and they got famous later, that person did it always, because they pick like the best actors or actresses. That person will always be the person who did it because they're a strong actor.
So spoiler there if you're like, oh look, wait,
hey. But like that rule does not apply to black actors and actresses though on that show, which is an interesting thing. Like I've watched it, like but like I think that like Law and Order, our expectations are so like action driven and not mystery at all.
Yeah.
And like the mystery there is like at the end you're like, oh, that's who did it. And she's like, and it's so telegraphed as you're watching it. You're like, oh, that's obviously a clue. Why are they lingering on that?
Well, that's why I used to be a big fan of Columbo. But Columbo I liked because they always had the different one. You knew who did it. Yeah. It was just how is he going to come across it, because it was so character based, character driven about what Peter Falk was going to do and what Columbo was going to do in order to come across those things. And I don't think you see a lot of those shows now where you would see bits and pieces of it with like Law and Order Criminal Intent or something like that, where it's all based upon the primary character and how their brain works and why you follow them around. Now it is so just murder of the week, guest star of the week on a lot of these procedurals.
Well, that's how they promote it now. It's like guest starring.
Yeah.
My friend Bill Styler, who I do a podcast with, sent me an article where somebody had a theory they had a suggestion that Columbo should become the American Doctor Who, and there should be a different like Columbo each, like as there are different Doctor Who's,
right?
Or like. I think that'd be great, because like Columbo is just like this rumpled guy who's always like taking on rich people, and you're just like he was very American, just a hardworking guy, and just like wore his casual rumpled.
And they always underestimate him just for reasons. Like they always presume that they're smarter than them or more connected than he is. And so I thought he was a very interesting character, and that's why I think that again back to the Murder, She Wrote thing. Does it? Can you update it? Does it translate? Maybe not, because like what Randy said, so much of it was so based upon. Sometimes it worked for that then.
Things alone.
Yeah. I mean, and I liked the way that they actually used that show, because that was when you would still have a lot of like the crossovers on a network, where if one show was having a problem, they would use that to try and inject some new life into it. So they did that with Magnum PI, and so they had her go and try and like fix Magnum PI, and it worked for like a little bit, and then Magnum PI still got canceled.
The other reason why like Murder, She Wrote wouldn't work now. Like Castle had to be paired with a police officer for it to make sense.
Yep.
Like if Castle went around and just solved murders, or everyone's like, wait, why are you allowed in here? Why are there murders wherever you go? And like people were like willing to suspend disbelief. And I think it's funny. Like sometimes I think it's funny just to not suspend disbelief.
Where it's like, no, this old lady did it.
It's hilarious. You're like, at this point, why isn't the FBI involved? You're like, and then there are just some weird episodes where it's amazing, and it's got like weird commentary where it's like kind of racist, but then it's not, but it is, but it's not. Like there was one where she was there was like a town gathering in like, I think it was maybe in Cabot Cove, and all of a sudden this like American Indian like guy ran in, like came in on a horse with like a spear and like threw it at them, and you're just like, what is happening? This is
not
crazy.
allowed, right?
And then it turns out that like it was like he was trying to like conjure up some type of like, to like scare the white people.
Yeah.
And then she was like, well, why would you, like everyone was like, but
why would you want to scare us white people? We're so nice.
She was actually more like, that's still kind of messed up though. Like that's not what your people are about. And like his people were like, that's not what you guys do. Like you guys like live in houses. Like what is happening here? And then it turns out like, they like somebody is like doing something to like the American Indians. And
were there ever episodes where it was almost like ripped from the headlines kind of thing?
I think like not,
because you talk about how the charm was actually the time.
Yeah, I think it was more like general stuff. Like there's like Death Takes a Dive. It's about like match fixing and boxing, and then like no, the Buds one was kind of about like friends, but like some of them were just, there was the great one about virtual reality. I think it was just like popular themes at the time. Like there was one called Virtual Murder, where Jessica goes to Silicon Valley and then like she's wearing like an Oculus Rift basically and like a Nintendo Power Glove, and there's someone who somehow manages to have all this data on like a floppy disk, and you're like, that's 2 megabytes, man. Like, that is not. And she goes and like the whole thing is
did that come out about the time like the Tron movie or something
about,
came
like,
out or
90,
something?
That one came out in like the 90s.
Okay.
Like there was one where like she so what happened is, I guess she was charged to write like this script for this video game about like a murder mansion or something, and then Kevin Sorbo is in this one, by the way. And she's writing the script, and they have a bug that they can't. This one door is like secretly they can't get rid of the door or something like that, and so they can't fix the bug. So Jessica's like, I'll just change the script, and then we're like, yeah, we can program around that. And I like to tell people about this who like work in like development and
computer gaming and
like like I used to work at like a web shop, dev shop, and they were all just like, we got to watch this and tear it apart. Like I really want to watch it with my boyfriend who's a developer and just be like,
here, fact check this old.
Like it's just hilarious because they're like, well, yeah, that's how bugs work. You like just kind of work around it. That's and it turns out that like this couple was having an affair in it, and like somebody got murdered because of an affair, and then like. I don't know.
She wrote in the bug so that you could eventually find her.
No, there's like a secret door, and then like that turns out if you enter this password. I don't even really remember. It's just like the glory of that whole episode. Like Wired wrote a whole great piece about it. It's an amazing episode.
Well, I think that the other thing that seems like whenever you're talking to me about Murder, She Wrote is that it's stuff that it's not necessarily that it holds up now, but that's what makes it so funny is that now it's turned into camp and it's enjoyable to watch because you're like, that is not reality. Yeah. Reality has changed so quickly because that show was, 80s to the mid 90s. It doesn't seem like that long ago until you really go, that's how quickly technology has changed that. And like the opening scenes of her walking around with her notebook and her having a typewriter and all this stuff, you're like, what's that thing? And
what's
just
a typewriter?
Exactly. So so seeing all of those things, change so quickly, I think is fascinating in these shows.
Yeah, the fact that it had a 12-year run, that still blows my mind.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I like that, and I like to watch like Facts of Life too.
So so Facts of Life, is that another one that translates to you? Or like, or do you feel nostalgic?
What about it? Because it's like, it's great. It's just like every third episode or fourth episode is like Tootie almost gets murdered off some shit. The best character, Blair. I believe Dave Zirin, who's a writer for The Nation, who's a sports and social justice writer, described the Facts of Life like Tootie and Natalie. Their friendship is like Alana and Abby from Broad City without the weed.
Okay.
Like they're just like they're the best. But like there's one episode called Dope from season 1, and this is a crazy episode for so many reasons. But like Helen Hunt is like a guest star on this, named like Tuffy or something, like some rich girl, and Blair tries to like join their group and they smoke weed, and Tootie wanders upstairs. This is season 1, so like Tootie's 12, and they have Helen Hunt has like a bong, and she's just like, oh, what's that? She's like, oh, it's for like candy. And then Tootie leaves, and somehow her and Natalie go to a head shop and they buy like a box of like bongs and they come back and they're just like, Mrs. Garrett's like, what's that? And Natalie's like, I'm gonna drink root beer out of mine. And Tootie's like, jelly beans. And then like Mrs. Garrett has the coolest response. Like the two girls get kicked out, but she was just like, you guys, like it was just like she wasn't like, it wasn't scare tactics or anything. It was just like, yeah, you can't do that now. Like she was pretty responsible about weed. So
are any of the Facts of Life stars do anything right now? I don't think so. But I don't have a lot of like they did horrible stories.
Wasn't Blair on like one of the Survivor shows?
Oh no,
I don't think she was. She's like right now like super Christian mom, because like there's an episode where Natalie loses her virginity, and it was supposed to be Blair, and Blair like became a born again Christian at some point during the run and refused to do it. And then there's another great episode where they all go to New York, and Tootie wasn't allowed to go, but somehow Tootie ends up like sneaking on a train going to New York, and then almost becomes like a prostitute. because she ends up at this diner and she befriends this woman who's a prostitute, and then like his pimp, and like it's
talk about stories that again aren't ripped from the headlines, but it's more like here's a theme that we want to cover, and we're gonna use this family related show.
Crazy, like she also went and like stalked Jermaine Jackson one episode and like threw like the biggest fan tantrum where Mrs. Garrett's like, you can't go, your parents said you couldn't go, and she's like, I want to see Jermaine, and had like a complete meltdown, and like even Mrs. Garrett's like, what is wrong with you?
It's like, you don't know my love, come on.
It was kind of crazy. I was like, she's gonna kill people, but yeah, Tootie is. There's also the episode where Tootie gets super militant.
So how do you pick what shows you're super into? Is there a certain kind of show that you gravitate
like,
towards?
No,
or you just go, this is on, I'm going to watch it for a while, and it just
somebody shows me like a funny clip or something, and then like Dave Zirin started live tweeting during the Super Bowl the first 20 minutes because he's very into social justice. He's really mad at the Super Bowl about like, you know, not like suspending people for weed and not like, but yet pushing prescription drugs on them.
Right.
And he just starts live tweeting during the Super Bowl the episode Dope. He's like, I'm going to do this just as like a moment of protest. We're all going to watch the Super Bowl, but just because I can. And so he does that. And then I just started like looking on YouTube, and there was like, you know, all sorts of crazy episodes. There's an episode where like Blair finds out her grandpa was like a grand wizard in the KKK. And like, there's just like so much insane shit happens. You're like, whoa, there's an episode where like.
So you binge watched at that point?
No, I just watch. Yeah,
she drops down rabbit holes of stuff,
Yeah,
and that's why once she's into something, if I know I'm not going to have time to watch it, I'll just have Brandy come over for like an afternoon. I'll learn everything
just
about it.
Just give her a little teaser. Hey, take a look at this.
Right?
Because Shannon,
tell me if I should watch it. Yeah. And so like, because I remember Brandy and my younger sister, they dropped down like this, like they got in this Bobby and Whitney. The TV show thing.
Being Bobby Brown is
the
greatest reality show that we will never see again.
And I was finally like, y'all, I need to go to sleep. You know, it was like 3:00 in the morning, and they were like, but wait, no, in this episode, here's the ridiculousness that happened. And so like, and they just both knew an amazing amount of information about this
show, and it's the one that because they somehow got this reality show that will never ever happen again.
It's terrible.
It's amazing because they somehow got the contract before they both went into rehab,
right?
And so it is insanity. And this
Bobby
is like
Chris,
and like
Chris.
Like there's one episode where like they're both high as hell the entire time, and Bobby Brown walks up. It was on Bravo,
I think.
Bravo right after it stopped being like classy.
Right. When it turned into just before it turned into all reality shows.
And like Phaedra from The Real Housewives is on this.
Right.
And
she had to remind me, she's like, wait, that's Phaedra. I'm like, oh yes, that is Phaedra.
There's one episode where Bobby Brown meets the Dalai Lama and he's like, Mr. Lama. And then there's one episode where like Bobby Brown and Whitney are talking about how like Whitney was constipated or something, and Bobby he's like, yeah, so I stuck my finger up her butt and helped her dig the boo-boo out. And everyone's like,
what? Exactly. Where did this ridiculousness come from? And they're like, thank you, Bravo.
There's also a clip online where Whitney Houston is like waiting for Bobby, and she's playing Shut Up by Black Eyed Peas in the car, and clearly high as hell, and just singing Shut Up and then like smoking a cigar, and like it's so amazing. You're just like, oh man. And apparently like Bravo, after it was released, they're like, we won't sign for the DVD, they shouldn't, but it's like in a vault somewhere. And so that's
just
like
one season.
Yeah, it was one season of madness.
Yes, and now you can find all these. They're all on YouTube.
But they're not very high quality. Because literally they locked that down. So I'm just like, when Whitney Houston died, I was like, I feel really bad, you guys, but I still want to watch Being Bobby Brown. And everyone's like,
I bet they saw a spike in that.
Yeah, well. They're never going to release it. It's so bad for her. It makes her look.
It
so
does
much
not.
better.
Yeah, it's not flattering.
It's not
flattering for Bobby. It's not flattering for anyone. It's like, you are terrible parents. These kids are going to get messed up.
They weren't terrible parents.
I felt like they were so distracted with their ridiculousness that they weren't inherently doing anything to harm the children, but they were not parenting.
Okay. It made me uncomfortable, and I'm a demon.
Yeah. And it was like, unlike like Keeping Up with the Kardashians or any of those, it was like a raw reality series.
Yeah.
Like it was stuff where you're like, I can't believe like nobody would script this. Like there's one point where they're staying in a hotel, and I don't know why Bobby Brown did this. He insisted on breaking into the mini bar instead of just like opening up and getting like the food. Like just you're
open
rich.
it.
And like he just like literally tried to take it apart. and just see. Like it was some shit only drugged up people.
Right. Where it's like, that's a terrible idea, but you think it's perfect. So
probably gonna go home and watch that now.
Yeah. So I mean, and you know, Brandy has a broad spectrum of I just like this show, and so we do occasionally sucker into but you should know more about this comic book, or you should know more about this.
Well, I think that's what like my boyfriend does. He loves his anime, and he loves we've settled on the compromise because I watched some anime and I'm just like, I don't like this one, and so we watch a lot of J dramas now.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a compromise.
We'll have to bring you into the J drama. My mom watches the K dramas, and so she's a big fan of the K dramas.
Well, a
so
lot
the
of
Korean
K-dramas
dramas
are remade J dramas and vice versa.
Yeah. So okay. Oh, Nika Hope just looking all confused. So it's Korean and Japanese dramas, and so part of the reason why they're interesting usually too is it's very similar to like when we were talking to Jayton about the Bollywood stuff, where these stars are huge, but they're part of this machine where they might be in a band with 12 other K-pop performers and all this stuff, and then they'll have a series and they'll be in, because their series aren't like Murder, She Wrote where they're trying to keep them on for 12 seasons. It'll be like one season, they'll go through this whole arc and then they'll pop up again somewhere, because there's not that they're not, you know, professional actors. It's just that storyline was only supposed to be 12 seasons. And they are they will drag you all over. I mean, here, we don't like to pull on, like, they'll do stuff to primary characters that we don't do in American dramas. Like, they will push them around and do this emotional.
Well, I mean, like, one of them that, because, like, also my boyfriend's kind of got this weird, like, a lot of weird pop culture blind spots, so I'll realize stuff, and he'll be like, what are you talking about? But we were watching one called Love and Fight, and it's like a comedy, kind of, and as soon as it started with this woman who got divorced from her husband, got super drunk, and ended up in a drunk tank and met like 3 women there. And I'm like, this is Sex in the City if it started in a drunk tank. He was like, what? I'm like, this is Sex in the City if it started in a drunk tank. And
he's like, what's Sex in the City?
Yeah, it basically was Sex in the City. And then they met this animal behavioral scientist, and she kind of joined their group. And I'm like, yep. That is your Miranda. Oh no, there was a lawyer. I'm like, that's your Miranda, and that's your Carrie, who was a writer. And I was like, this is clearly Sex in the City. And at one point in like episode 8, they're watching Sex in the City, and I was like, yeah. And he's like, good call. I know what they're doing here. And so I read an article about it.
K-pop?
This is a J drama called Love and Fight. And then there's another one called that we kind of started watching that we didn't really like, called Train Man, and it's kind of like if Reddit was like helping someone find love, and they were like all arguing on a message board, and it's got the different. I like the side characters, but like the main characters.
So tell us about your podcast too.
I have a podcast called Brandy and Bill Talk About Blaxploitation, and it's with me and my friend Bill Steitler, who is like a 40-something white guy, and he loves movies, and I don't really watch movies that much, but I am black, so and we just watch them. He's like, you gotta watch this, and then we just watch it and talk about it, and we're like, what the hell is happening here?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes we won't watch movies that are blaxploitation, like, necessarily technically. Like, we watch The Wiz. We'll just watch black movies sometimes, and, you know, we kind of play loose with it. But we watched Petey Wheatstraw last night, and that podcast just went up.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll have to link to your stuff as well.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And then, because I end up, you know, as the black woman on this thing, I end up mad at stuff that they're like, why are you mad? I know. Why are you mad about that? And I'm like, well, let me explain, why this, like, because we were, when Nika Hotep and I went to the comic book convention a couple of weeks ago, there was a comic book there, and it was a local artist, and I'm not going to blast him because I don't think he was trying to be racist. It was one of those things where I'm like, yeah. And so it had a series of different comic books that featured women of color, and the black one had she had an afro and an outfit that wasn't too questionably drawn, but it was called Redbone, and I'm like, yep, not okay with that. Don't think I'm okay with that.
Erotic like thing?
No. So I'm like, and I looked at it again. It was more like kind of like a Misty Knights type thing. So it was supposed to be, but
it was more of a period thing.
Yeah,
I think.
And I'm like, yeah, still don't think I'm okay with that.
We did an episode, like a special episode after we'd watched like Tyler Perry's Temptation, which is the worst movie of Tyler Perry's movies. And we
why is it the worst?
It's because it's just like this whole thing where it's like, hey, if you have feelings for another man, you're gonna get AIDS. Like, it's that one with AIDS and stuff. It's the worst. You can listen to that episode where we just get mad, and I get progressively drunker. And at the end of this, I'm eating like snacks. I'm eating Bill and his wife's rabbits like banana chips. And I'm like, guys, can we just do a special one-off episode, because there's an issue of Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane.
Yes.
Where Superman turns Lois Lane into a black woman. This is from like the 70s, and it's the greatest. It's insanity. And so I know this by heart. I've written about it several times, and I just recap this entire comic book.
And do you want to share that story now, or do you want to come back and share it and not stare it?
Let's have an episode. That'd be fun.
All right.
Because it's a great story.
It's insane. It's
a great story.
Comic,
so if you want to table it, then I could table it if you want, or you could tell the story now. Okay, let her tell the story. It's a great story. You guys are going to love the story.
So this is Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane is a whole series of Superman comics, and the whole point is that like Lois Lane wants to get married to Superman.
Right.
Like, every single issue is like
her tricking him.
The covers are amazing. There's one where like Superman got turned into a baby, and Lois Lane is babysitting the baby, and she's spanking him, and she's like, "This will show you for not loving me."
Right.
And then there's one where like
it's just crazy.
There's one with
absolutely cray.
Superman and Lois Lane are in space, and Superman's like disconnecting Lois Lane's like life support system, and she's like, I'll get it. And he's like, she's gonna murder me.
You know, in the Muppet movies where Miss Piggy just won't leave Kermit alone. It's that version, but Superman and Lois in everything.
Every single issue.
Right.
So this one it came out in 1970, and Lois Lane is trying to write a article for the Daily Planet, and she was just like, she wants to know about like what's it like being black in Metropolis. So she goes to the little Africa neighborhood, that's what it's really called, and she goes to visit like slum tenements, which just look like regular apartments. And she walks up to some kids, and she's like, "What's it like being black?" And the kids are like, "What?" And
go away.
And then she like walks up to like some other person, and they walk away. And then she sits down on the bench next to an old black woman who is like, "The sun's shining down on your face. It's so beautiful." and then Lois Lane, instead of just saying like, "Yeah, it is," or like talking to her like a normal person, she's like, "What's it like being black?" And then the woman like walks away, and it turns out the woman's blind, and Lois Lane just walks sad. And this is a direct quote, like a homeless ghost down the street. And Superman just shows up, like, "Hey, you seem to be having some trouble. I can help you. Come with me." And he takes her back to his lair, and he has a machine. He's like, "All right, I'm going to turn you black for 24 hours.
Ta-da!
And he has a machine, and she comes out in, like...
Because they needed that on Krypton for whatever reason.
Out in, like, with, like, an afro and, like, a dashiki. And then she walks outside, and the first thing that happens is it rains, and she worries about her hair. And I'm like, well, that is correct.
Yes.
And then she tries to get a cab. She got a cab before, and the cabbie won't pick her up. So she has to take the subway, and the white people on the subway are staring at her. And she's like, "I've gotten my first lesson in being black."
Yes.
And then you think, okay, no, it gets crazier. And then she walks back to the apartments, and she walks in, and the first thing she sees in this apartment is like a garbage fire.
Why?
Yeah. And then she puts out the fire. She goes upstairs and knocks on this woman's door. And this black woman opens the door and is like, "Oh, come on in." She's like, "Are you a bill collector?" Okay, first of all, if it is a bill collector, nobody answers the door when it's a bill collector.
No.
And then she's like, "No, I'm just here to write a story." And the woman's like, "Come on in."
Welcome.
And then they just talk about being black, but you don't really like learn anything about being black. And then you hear a scream, and the woman's like, "Oh no, it's my daughter. She's playing with her friend." And then the Lois Lane it's like, "Who is your friend?" And she goes out, and the kid is playing with a rat. And then I was like, okay, first of all, I've seen Stuart Little, rich white people do this too. And then, so she goes and like the kid, like I guess the mom like shoos the rat away. And then Lois Lane is like walking around the neighborhood, and there's like a guy who's like having like a black people's meeting. It's like yelling about how like white people are the worst.
And Lois is like, "Wait."
But then she walks down like a street, and there's like an alley. There's like a charter school or something in the alley where this teacher's being like, "What is black?" And then the kid's like, "Beautiful." And then the teacher stops, sees Lois Lane. He's like, "Ooh, I think I've seen you here before." And then Lois is like, "No." And then he's like, "Oh, I'm sure I have." And she's like, "Maybe." And
I'm new black.
And then she's like, "I don't want to go back. I'm black." And then then they're hanging out, and Lois Lane like all of a sudden these two like dudes who are dressed like pimps are like stealing TVs or something. I don't know, this black guy, this white guy. And the teacher hears this. He's like, "Oh no, they're back in our neighborhood. We got to go fight them." And Lois is like, "I'll come along." He's like, "No women. I'm going to handle this like a man." She goes, "I'm a journalist." He's like, "Okay." And then, And then he goes to fight the two guys who are stealing TVs, and somehow Superman shows up at the same time and like zaps the two guys and melts their guns, and then the other guy still somehow gets shot. And so he goes to the hospital, and Lois Lane is giving him a blood transfusion. Like they give him a blood transfusion, and then Lois Lane is still black. She goes into a waiting room with Superman, and she's like, Superman, I have a question. He's like, yeah. He's like, would you still love me if I stay black? And he's like, yeah, I'm not even from Earth. So yeah, he's always said this. I'm not even from Earth. So yeah. And she's like, great. Then why aren't we married? And he's like, really?
Right.
And then suddenly she turns back into a white woman, and the black nurse the black nurse who saw her as a black woman opens the door, is like, oh, he's awake now. Sees this white woman, and she was like, it's me, Lois. And the nurse is like, okay. And then. And then she goes into the hospital room with the black guy, and he's like, who the hell are you? And she's like, it's me, Lois. And then they shake hands at the end because racism got solved. Like, that's the whole comic.
Wow.
And I just like that, if you're going to suspend disbelief, that's direction that you have to go. Because it's like, all right, this is ridiculous on so many levels. I'm all in. Let's just go.
But it's like, also, why does Superman have this?
Right.
Like I think Superman is down with the swirl.
With the swirl.
Can we get cable?
No, we can't get cable. Kind of thing. I'll buy you some vintage comics though if you want. I think, and it's just back to this is just another example of like Superman is lame and kind of thing. Why would I do it?
Another reoccurring theme is that Lois Lane is like always like dating Batman just to make Superman jealous. There's one.
That's why the new movie's coming out.
There's one
Batman
issue
Superman.
where like Superman is coming through the window and he's like. Lois Lane is like putting on her bat suit, and there's a picture of just like Batman on her desk, like his headshot, and it just says, to my dear Lois Lane, love Batman. It's just like a smiling Batman, and Superman's like, are you gonna marry Batman? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, just because I won't marry you? She's like, yeah. And then there's one where the entire Justice League is like, they're lined up to make out with her. It's like Batman, Aquaman.
Whoa, what is happening?
I'm not even serious.
No, this is a cover. It's Batman, Aquaman, and like someone else, and they're all lined up. And Lois Lane is like making out, and Batman's like, hurry up, it's my turn. And you're like, what?
What is this?
What is
That is a cover. I have several of these on my phone. I can show you after.
Yeah, see, we're gonna have to have Brandy on again because we can have lots of our. Every time I need one of my women's issues covered, I would be like, Brandy, come in. I'm going to complain about some stuff, and she will have the supporting documentation for it. So, Brandy, again, the name of your podcast, so we can.
Brandy and Bill talk about blaxploitation, and my website is houseofprocrastination.org.
Perfect. And I will also link up to all that. We'll make sure that we'll tweet her. She is fantastic on Twitter, so everybody can follow her. And we will make sure we have her on again. Of course, we are coming to the end of this week's Your Geek Show. Next week, Rob Callahan will be back, and we'll talk about Colin Baker. We also have our guest geek next week, John Marino from MASH Digital Marketing. He is a digital marketing and app geek. Yeah. And so he has some apps that he thinks will piss off NASA. And if you ever wonder who looks at all of these apps, when you go into like the Google Play Store, if you're on iTunes, you're like, there's way too many of these things out here. Who sits around and weeds through them? It's John Marino from MASH Digital. So he's going to come and talk to us about his app fixation next week.
I'm looking forward to that. That's
yeah.
Really fun.
So thanks again to our sponsors, Custom T-Shirt Central, to the Twin Cities Film Fest. I know Jayton and his folks over there are gearing up for this year, and they've been keeping very busy. Also to Chris McDuffie from Christopher McDuffie Photography. Did you finish your headshots yet, Jayton?
Yeah, they look great.
Oh, good. You need to let me see them. I would love to see them. I'm sure you look very handsome. You know, thing. And again, to TwinCitiesGeek.com, our other digital partner. So again, follow us on Facebook at Your Geek Show MN. Follow us on Twitter at Your Geek Show, and we will see you next week.